People think a courtroom is loud, shouting, gavels, grand speeches. Most mornings mine starts quieter, paperwork, footsteps, and that familiar smell of old wood, black coffee, and wet coats. My father used to say, "You don't get respect by demanding it. You earn it by being steady when everyone else is shaking." I've carried that line into every robe I've worn. On my desk, tucked under the files, sits his faded pocket knife. I don't use it. I just like knowing it's there. A reminder that justice isn't a performance, it's a responsibility. That Tuesday in early January, the courthouse in Savannah woke up slowly. River fog clung to the square outside. I arrived before sunrise and nodded at the deputies settling in. My clerk, Marla, was sorting the docket with her focus. Marla has a face that tells the truth even when her mouth doesn't. When a defendant lies, her left eyebrow rises. When someone is hurting, her eyes soften for half a second, then she looks down, like she's keeping her heart on a leash. "Morning, Judge," she said, sliding a folder toward me. "Morning, Marla. Anything I should know?" Her eyebrow lifted, just a notch. Packed room. I scanned the schedule. Most cases looked ordinary. Minor disputes, probation check-ins, small mistakes that could cost someone a job. The kind of work that rarely gets attention, but has consequences. At 9 sharp, I took the bench. The bailiff called the room to order, and the chatter fell away. I always watch the gallery before I watch the file. People tell you who they are long before they speak. The first matters moved quickly. I set payment plans. I gave warnings meant as lifelines. I reminded one young man that an apology is not a strategy, it's a start. Then, between cases, I noticed a man near the back, janitor's uniform, scuffed shoes, hands folded like he was praying without words. Beside him sat a worn canvas bag pressed against his shin. He held it the way you hold something fragile in a crowd, careful, afraid of bumping into the wrong person. In the front row, I felt a different kind of presence, restless. A young woman in a white designer coat kept using her phone as a mirror. A man next to her wore a watch and a grin that never reached his eyes. Behind them, 2 attorneys leaned in close, whispering like the courtroom was their private boardroom. Marla stepped forward with the next file, and her expression tightened. "State versus Cole Hart and Lila Monroe," she announced. The names meant nothing to me. But the room changed. Shoulders stiffened. A few people craned their necks. I saw a phone rise, quickly lowered when a deputy glanced that way. As the defendant stood, the young woman, Lila, turned slightly, angling her face toward the benches, lips moving as if speaking to someone who wasn't there. Cole didn't look at me. He looked past me, like the bench was just another obstacle he'd clear with money and charm. I have learned to be patient. I've also learned to respect my instincts. My father's voice returned, calm as ever. "Be steady when everyone else is shaking. Before we begin, I'll ask you this. If you care about stories where accountability still matters, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It helps this message travel farther than these walls ever could." I glanced at the charge sheet, misdemeanor assault, harassment, obstruction. On paper, not the most serious list, but Marla's raised eyebrow told me the paper didn't carry the whole weight, and that janitor in the back? He was gripping his bag tighter now, knuckles pale, as if whatever was inside was the only thing he could still protect. That's when I knew this was not going to be an ordinary Tuesday. When you sit behind a bench long enough, you develop a strange sense for trouble. Not the loud kind that storms through the doors shouting, but the quiet kind that walks in smiling. That morning, it walked in, wearing expensive perfume. "State versus Cole Hart and Lila Monroe," the bailiff repeated. The 2 defendants stepped forward like they were arriving at a photo shoot instead of a courtroom. Cole Hart was tall, polished, the kind of man who had probably never waited in a line longer than 5 minutes. His suit fit too perfectly, his hair too deliberate. He leaned against the defense table with a confidence that suggested consequences were a rumor he had never personally experienced. Lila Monroe stood beside him. Even if I hadn't heard the whispers in the courtroom, I would have known she was famous. She carried herself the way people do when millions of strangers watch their lives through a screen. Perfect makeup, expensive coat, a phone she held like it was part of her hand. My clerk Marla handed me the file. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I looked at them. "Mr. Hart," I said calmly, "how do you plead to the charges of assault and harassment?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," he replied quickly. No hesitation, no concern, just confidence. "And Miss Monroe?" She placed a hand over her chest, as if preparing for a dramatic scene. "Not guilty, Your Honor. I just want to say I'm really sorry if anyone misunderstood what happened." Misunderstood. That word floats into courtrooms like smoke. It's amazing how often people claim misunderstanding when cameras start rolling. Behind them, their attorney stepped forward. He was polished too, one of those lawyers who speaks in smooth sentences that glide around responsibility without touching it. "Your Honor," he began, "this situation has been exaggerated online. My clients were leaving a private event when they were approached aggressively by an individual who works as a janitor at the building next door." My eyes shifted toward the back of the courtroom. The janitor. The man I had noticed earlier slowly stood up when the prosecutor called his name. "Mr. Daniel Rivera," she said. He walked forward carefully, like someone used to making himself smaller in crowded places. His uniform was clean but worn. The knees of his pants had faded from years of kneeling on tile floors. And that canvas bag. He carried it with him to the witness stand. When he sat down, I noticed his hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Rivera," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell the court what happened on the night of December 18th? Daniel cleared his throat. "I was finishing my shift, Your Honor. I cleaned the office building across the street." His voice was soft but steady. "I was waiting for the bus outside the restaurant. I had my bag with me. Mr. Hart and Miss Monroe came out after dinner." Cole leaned back, arms crossed. Daniel continued. "They were laughing, talking about a video they had posted earlier that night." Lila shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't say anything to them at first," Daniel said. "But when they passed by, Miss Monroe pointed her phone at me." The courtroom grew quiet. "She started filming." Lila's lawyer quickly interjected. "Your Honor, my client is a public personality. She often records content in public spaces. There's nothing illegal about filming." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand that," he said. Then he looked directly at me. "But she didn't just film me." He paused. "She told her followers to watch what happens when creepy night workers hang around rich neighborhoods." A few people in the gallery murmured. Marla's eyebrow lifted. Daniel continued. "Mr. Hart asked what was in my bag." Cole laughed quietly under his breath. "I told him it was just my things, my lunch container, my jacket." Daniel swallowed hard. But he didn't believe me. "What did he do next?" the prosecutor asked. Daniel looked down at the bag in his hands. "He tried to take it." The room went silent. "He said people like me steal things." Cole rolled his eyes. Daniel's voice shook now. "I told him to stop, that the bag wasn't his." "And then?" the prosecutor asked. Daniel took a slow breath. "He pushed me." The words landed like a dropped glass. "And while he did it," Daniel said quietly, "Miss Monroe kept filming." Lila's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor, we dispute this version entirely." I raised my hand. "You'll have your chance, counselor." I leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Rivera," I said, "why were you holding that bag so tightly?" Daniel hesitated. Then he slowly opened the canvas zipper. Inside was a small cardboard box, and whatever was inside it moved. In my courtroom, the truth rarely arrives all at once. It usually enters slowly, through small details, quiet moments, and things people wish had never been recorded. Daniel Rivera sat in the witness chair holding that worn canvas bag like it was the last thing in the world that belonged to him. "Mr. Rivera," I said gently, "you may show the court what's inside." He nodded once. Carefully, he opened the cardboard box. At first, all I saw was a folded gray towel. Then the towel moved. A tiny kitten's head appeared from beneath the fabric, eyes wide, ears barely standing. The softest creature you could imagine staring out into a courtroom full of strangers. The entire room inhaled at the same time. Even Marla's raised eyebrows softened. Daniel lifted the kitten slowly, cradling it with both hands. I found her behind the dumpsters near the restaurant, he explained quietly. It was freezing that night. Someone had left her in a box. The kitten made a small, tired sound. I didn't want her to die out there, Daniel continued, so I put her in my bag to keep her warm while I waited for the bus. For a moment, nobody spoke. I have seen hardened criminals sit in front of me without blinking, but a helpless animal has a way of cutting through the noise of pride and excuses. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Mr. Rivera," she said, "what happened when Mr. Hart tried to take your bag?" Daniel swallowed. "He said I probably stole something from the restaurant." Cole shook his head, smiling slightly. "That's ridiculous," he muttered. "I didn't look at him yet." Daniel continued. "I told him it was just a kitten, that she needed warmth." He paused. But Miss Monroe started laughing. Lila shifted in her seat, whispering something to her lawyer. "She said it would make great content," Daniel said. Those words landed heavy in the room. The prosecutor walked toward the evidence table. "Your Honor, we would like to present Exhibit A." She nodded toward the clerk. A large monitor on the wall flickered to life. "I believe Miss Monroe is very familiar with this video," the prosecutor said. Lila's face tightened. The footage began to play. At first, the camera was shaky, clearly filmed on a phone. The restaurant lights glowed behind two figures stepping onto the sidewalk. Lila's voice came through the speakers, cheerful and careless. "Okay, guys, we just left dinner and look who we found outside." The phone tilted downward, the screen filled with the image of Daniel Rivera standing near the curb with his canvas bag. The courtroom stayed silent. On the video, Cole stepped forward. "Hey," he said sharply. "What's in the bag?" Daniel's voice in the video was nervous. "It's nothing, just my things." The camera zoomed closer. Lila giggled. "Guys, I think we caught a thief." A few people in the gallery gasped. The video continued. Cole grabbed the bag. Daniel tried to pull it back. "Please," Daniel said in the footage, "there's a kitten inside." The next moment happened fast. Cole shoved him, hard. Daniel stumbled backward against a metal bench and fell to the pavement. The courtroom murmured. But what happened next made the room go completely still. While Daniel struggled to get up, the camera zoomed in. Lila's voice rang clearly through the speakers. "Babe, show them what he's hiding." She was laughing. Cole opened the bag and lifted the small cardboard box. The kitten cried softly. "Oh my God," Lila said in the video, "it's a cat." Then she said something that made even the deputies shift uncomfortably. "Throw it away. It probably has fleas." The video froze on that frame. I slowly removed my glasses and placed them on the bench. The courtroom air felt heavier now. Cole's confidence had faded. His smile had disappeared. Lila stared straight ahead, lips pressed tightly together. I looked toward the gallery. People were shaking their heads. Some looked angry, some looked heartbroken. Before moving forward, I turned slightly toward the cameras mounted in the courtroom. "Let me pause here for a moment," I said. "If you're watching this story right now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever seen someone treated like they didn't matter simply because of their job, their clothes, or their situation? If you believe dignity should never depend on status, take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this remind us what kind of society we are becoming." Then I turned back to the defendants. The turning point had arrived, and the truth was, now sitting quietly in a cardboard box on the witness stand. When the video stopped, the silence inside the courtroom felt different. It wasn't the quiet of confusion anymore. It was the quiet of realization. I've presided over thousands of cases, and there is always a moment when the air shifts, when excuses begin to collapse under the weight of what everyone has just witnessed. This was that moment. Cole Hart stared at the table in front of him. The confidence he walked in with had drained out of his face. Lila Monroe still sat upright, but the performance had faded. The camera that once made her comfortable had become the very thing exposing her. I folded my hands on the bench. "Mr. Hart," I said calmly, "you told this court the situation was exaggerated." He cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor, I just reacted." "Reacted?" I repeated slowly. I gestured toward the screen. "You reacted by grabbing a man's belongings, pushing him to the ground, and laughing while it was filmed." Cole shifted in his chair. "He could have been stealing something," he said defensively. The prosecutor didn't need to speak. The video had already spoken for her. I turned toward Lila. "Miss Monroe," I said. She looked up. "Did you film that video?" "Yes," she said quietly. "And did you post it online?" Her lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something, but she nodded anyway. "Yes." I leaned back slightly. "How many followers do you have?" "About 3 million, she answered. 3 million people watching your life." She didn't respond. I glanced toward Marla, who was writing notes quietly beside me. Her expression told me exactly what she was thinking. Then I returned my attention to Leela. "Tell me something honestly," I said. "When you posted that video, what were you hoping people would say?" She hesitated. "I don't know," she said. "You don't know?" I asked. Her voice grew smaller. "Maybe that it was funny." A few quiet murmurs moved through the courtroom. I nodded slowly. My father's voice echoed again in my memory. "Be steady when everyone else is shaking." I stood from the bench. Sometimes a judge needs to remain seated. Sometimes standing reminds everyone that justice is not just paperwork, it's responsibility. "Mr. Rivera," I said. Daniel looked up from the witness stand, still holding the kitten wrapped in the towel. "Yes, Your Honor." "How long have you worked as a janitor?" 17 years, he replied. 17 years cleaning offices most people never notice. He nodded. "Why did you stop to save that kitten?" I asked. Daniel looked down at the small animal in his hands. "Because someone needed to." 3 simple words. Someone needed to. Those words carried more character than anything I had heard from the defense table all morning. I turned back toward Cole and Lila. "You see," I said, "the problem with cruelty is that it often hides behind convenience." They remained silent. It is convenient to believe someone who works nights doesn't matter. It is convenient to believe someone without a suit must be suspicious. I let the words settle. "But what you revealed that night wasn't just poor judgment." I gestured toward the screen again. "You revealed something about how you see other people." Cole's attorney finally stood. "Your Honor, my client has expressed willingness to compensate Mr. Rivera for any distress." Compensate. Money. The courtroom had heard that language before. I nodded slowly. "Mr. Hart," I said, "do you come from a wealthy family?" Cole hesitated. "Yes." "Your father is present today?" A man in the second row stood, gray suit, serious face. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "Sir," I asked calmly, "have you seen the video that was just played?" "Yes." "And what is your opinion of your son's behavior?" The man took a long breath. "I'm ashamed." The word echoed through the courtroom. Cole turned toward him in disbelief. "Dad," his father raised a hand. "You humiliated someone who was trying to help a defenseless animal," he said firmly. Cole fell silent. I returned to my seat slowly. Justice is not about anger, it is about clarity. And clarity had arrived. The courtroom knew what had happened. The evidence was clear. Now only one thing remained, the consequence. When you wear the robe long enough, you learn something important. Sentences end cases, but they don't end stories. I looked down at the file one last time before speaking. The charges were not the worst I had seen in my career, but the harm was deeper than the paperwork could measure. Because sometimes the real damage is not physical. Sometimes it is dignity. "Mr. Hart," I said. Cole stood slowly. "Based on the evidence presented and the video footage shown in this courtroom, I find you guilty of assault and harassment." The room stayed silent. "You will serve 9 months in the county correctional facility," I continued, "followed by 18 months of probation." Cole's head snapped up. "9 months?" he said under his breath, but I wasn't finished. "You will also complete 400 hours of community service with the city sanitation department." A few people in the gallery exchanged surprised glances. "Yes," I said calmly. "You will clean the same streets and buildings that people like Mr. Rivera have quietly maintained for years." Cole said nothing. I turned toward Lila Monroe. "Miss Monroe, please stand." She rose slowly, her confidence now completely gone. "You filmed a man being humiliated and encouraged it for entertainment," I said. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "You will serve 60 days in county custody," I continued, "with an additional year of supervised probation." Her eyes widened. "Your Honor, your career," I said gently but firmly, "should never depend on another person's suffering." The room remained completely still. "In addition," I continued, "your social media accounts will be suspended for the duration of your probation. No monetization, no promotional content." Her shoulders dropped. "And when those accounts return," I said, "your first post will not be about fashion or travel." She looked up. "It will be a full apology to Mr. Rivera, explaining exactly what you did and why it was wrong." For the first time all morning, Lila Monroe had no words. Then I turned toward the witness stand. "Mr. Rivera." Daniel looked up slowly. "You came to court today with humility and patience," I said. "You showed more dignity in this room than many people with wealth and influence." He shifted nervously. "You also saved a life." The kitten meowed softly, as if it understood it had been mentioned. The courtroom chuckled quietly. "I am ordering restitution to cover any medical expenses from the fall you suffered that night," I continued. "And the city's animal care program has agreed to cover the veterinary costs for your new companion." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "You may keep the kitten," I added with a small smile. The room softened. Marla even allowed herself the smallest grin. As deputies escorted the defendants away, Cole looked toward his father one last time. His father didn't move. He simply watched, silently. Sometimes disappointment speaks louder than anger. After the courtroom began to empty, Daniel approached the bench slowly. "Your Honor," he said. "Yes, Mr. Rivera." "Thank you for listening." I shook my head gently. "Justice begins with listening," I told him. He opened the small towel again so the kitten could breathe. It blinked up at the bright courtroom lights. "What will you name her?" I asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "Maybe. Lucky." I smiled. That afternoon, after everyone had gone home, the courthouse returned to its usual quiet. The smell of old wood and coffee still hung in the air. Marla finished organizing the files and looked toward me. "You knew that case would be different, didn't you?" she asked. I leaned back in the chair. "My father used to say something," I told her. She waited. "Character shows up when no one important is watching." I glanced toward the now empty courtroom. "But these days," I added softly, "someone is always watching." The question is whether we remember to be human anyway. Before you go, let me ask you something. Have you ever witnessed someone treated unfairly because of their job or status? If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters. And if you want to hear more stories about the moments when justice reminds us who we are supposed to be, make sure you subscribe and join me for the next one, because every courtroom has another story waiting behind the next case file.